Good evening. Welcome. We're glad you're joining us tonight. We're really glad to be here again to give you an opportunity to ask questions. And we are live. It is 7 o'clock on Tuesday. What is the date today? The 2nd of April. So if you're joining us live, as always, we have the opportunity and we conduct this in such a way that you can ask questions live and get live answers. And so please feel free to throw any questions in the chat box, and we will field those as soon as we see them. I'm Tonight we're talking about the title is "What Makes a Good Man," and the topic title obviously kind of gives the direction of the podcast for the first hour clearly. And so I want to kind of give everybody an opportunity to weigh in on this from an opinion perspective. And I actually had so many different ideas as far as illustrations, scriptures, and it's, obviously that's a good thing because the Bible has a lot to say about being a man. And there are, in our society, especially in the United States, and I know for a fact because I've researched this and I've listened to different podcasts and I've listened to different interviews and stuff like that having to do with how other countries deal with gender confusion, stuff like that. And that's not the direction I want to go tonight. I want to talk about very fundamentally what is a man and what makes a man. And so first we will define a man, and then we'll talk about how to become one in the realistic sense. My favorite period in history to read about is World War II. And there's a book written with this title, and it is aptly called The Greatest Generation. And for many reasons, but I've read quite literally dozens of books on World War II from many different perspectives and covering many different categories. And it's incredible to read because here you had this worldwide problem, and a problem that was going to affect the entire world. No matter where you were, it was going to impact small society, big society. And you had men and women who literally just rose to the challenge. Multiple countries that came together and fought against both Hitler and Japan. And if you do any reading about what Japan and Germany and at a certain point Russia was doing, and all the way into Italy, there were all kinds of crazy things happening. But it was really brutal. What was happening was these people were ripping humanity from different countries and just absolutely destroying these countries. And so the rest of the world saw that, and both men and women alike joined together and literally started doing anything they could to support the effort against these countries and these armies. And the thing that has always stood out to me about it, and the reason why it's my favorite part and a period of history, is you had men who were living normal lives. They all had normal plans, right? And then when the war hit specifically the United States and England, when it hit that, all of a sudden these men rose up. Men rose up, and their names, carried on after the fact. But these men just did what they had to do, and they rose to the challenge. And that's the reason why it's really fascinating to read, and really not fascinating, inspiring to read. You read these stories about men who they put their lives on the line. Many of them gave their lives, and deliberately gave their lives to literally further the cause against the Axis. And so the scripture that came to my mind when I was thinking about this is 1 Corinthians 13. The whole chapter, it's literally called the chapter of love, or I think it's I can't remember there's like a specific title. It's kind of cliche, but it's Paul's talking about the importance of love, and then he kind of just slaps this thing in the middle or at the end of it, and he says, "When I was a child, I talked like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child, but when I became a man, I set aside childish ways." Mm-hmm. And so with that scripture in mind, I want to ask first, to Pastor Ford, what is, he's preached a whole sermon on being childish, but we kind of just want to talk about a little bit more of the specifics on what is childish, because there's a quote. It's actually not a direct quote. It's more of a thought that is peppered through different, books and philosophies and all kinds of ways of thinking, but that men are not born, they're made. Yeah. And so it's almost like there's this deliberate decision behind becoming a man, both in the scriptures and in, deep thinking, we'll call it. And so what is what are some childish things that from the perspective of when you become a man, these are things you shouldn't be doing anymore?
Yeah. Well, honestly, almost everything that you did when you were a child, when it comes right down to it. That's why the term is childish. It's childlike. You're doing things that children do. And so I think one of the difficulties we have today, you had mentioned the issues of gender and these concerns, and it's quite interesting to me the kinds of things that we're actually embracing in thinking as a society, that 5-year-olds know more about themselves than their parents is a very strange concept, because if you zoom out and just look at this without an emotional investment in it, it says a lot about a parent. When a parent thinks, no, my 5-year-old knows more about life and how they want to live life than I do, it really does say something about how little of life you really must know then. Because how can a 5-year-old know more about life than you do? I thought the whole idea of being an adult was that you had experienced X number of years as an adult, and that's what makes you an adult is your experience. Whereas a child cannot have, at 5 years old, cannot have those kinds of experiences. And so if you factor this out, when it comes to being adults, that's the issue, is that if you still feel that behavior that is questionable, it is acceptable as a small child, is questionable as a older child, you still think that's okay as an adult, that again it explains about, where you are, and that you haven't matured, you haven't grown up.
Immaturity, that's the word I was just going to say. It's an issue of maturity. It's not an issue of...
Yeah, it's growing. It's growing. Yeah. The idea of growing. I'm surprised when my son Elliot was probably 8 years old, he was more interested in being an adult than a lot of adults that I have met. And it's very interesting to me, is that a lot of adults have this, I don't know how to describe it as much as, it's not an obsession. It's the Peter Pan syndrome thing of, I'm not ready to leave my childhood, and they have found ways of enjoying things or continuing to do things that children do, that adults don't. One of the things that is very interesting to me is something that I've noticed. Right across the board, it's not isolated to any particular place, but how being late has become okay with people, is that just the idea of being late to everything. Literally to everything. When you're in a like in a church situation, because there are so many things that start at certain periods of times, and you realize how many people are literally late to every single thing. It doesn't matter what it is, they're late. It could be food, it could be something important, it could be casual get-togethers, it could be two people going out. Being late is just not a concern. It's like, okay, we'll meet at 7:00, and then 7:10 is okay, and so that other person's just sitting there. And I've noticed that that's what ends up happening, is you just wait for everybody to show up. And so you make a time for something, everything's It doesn't really start at, the idea of something starting at 7 o'clock just isn't reality anymore. And I thought this is what children do. Children are like this because when you think about it, what you have people that have they've been playing, and they've lost track of time. That's what happens, is oh shoot, I need to be somewhere. Well, just like when they were kids, they've not learned anything, and so it's interesting to me, and it's like if you can't be do something as simple as be on time, how can you do anything that's important? I mean, in life, how can you do anything that's important if you can't even simply be on time? Which is why so many companies are I think they're losing the battle here, but why so many companies are really, basing a lot of their promotions and who's going to work what based on the timeliness of a person. Can a person be there at a certain time? Can they be relied upon to show up, to be able to do a certain thing? And so it really is all childishness. It's not just a particular thing. It's not just a singular thing that if you're doing this thing, you're childish. It's anything that is acceptable for children that isn't acceptable for older people, but that older people choose to do anyway. That's childish.
So we talked a while back, actually it was a couple weeks ago, we were it was you and me and some of the guys were out to breakfast the other day, and I remember the conversation started going towards value and what men value and how men develop a value system, and we started talking a little bit about some specific stuff, but in another direction. But it got me to thinking about this issue of learning a value system, because clearly when you're a child, you don't value the same things that an adult does, right?
Yeah.
And so where does a man, and we're thinking biblically here, like where does a man learn the right value system?
Yeah. Well,
and desire.
Yeah. That's one of those statements that is always one of those statements that's like, no, scratch that, because there's no such thing as, we're talking biblically. And honestly, I think that it's, when you say we're talking biblically about a particular thing, you might as well, I think, use the word fantasy in place of biblically. When you talk, when we talk like that, because that's really what you're saying is, I'm not talking about reality where everybody lives. I'm talking about where us, 5% of the
Should
world
I clarify? I can clarify.
And so
I said that on purpose. Mainly because I know that in the secular, non-Christian world, the value system is different.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not.
Okay.
It's the same.
Okay.
The
So
value
the drive
system,
for fame and success and money is the same in the Bible.
that's not a value.
It is.
Those aren't values.
That's in the secular world. It is. Absolutely.
No, they're not.
Absolutely. People.
No, they're
Are
not.
you kidding me?
No, they're not. They're not values.
We're going to go into another podcast
No.
here.
Yeah, they're not values.
Okay.
They're not
Next
values.
podcast title is "What is Value?"
Yeah, but they're not values. You can call it a value system, and you can say it's what people value.
I know what
and
you're saying.
You can say all those kinds of things.
I do understand.
But when you look at
More
people,
being facetious.
right? But what you're talking about is people who value those things are people who are not very good at those things.
Mm-hmm.
Because they don't understand they're not values.
Yeah.
They understand people that are good at those kinds of things. They actually are, they're not targeting those things. Like somebody who's successful is not targeting success. Mm-hmm. Somebody who's famous is not targeting fame. That's if they're famous in a value way, then they're not targeting those things. Mm-hmm. And so it's not that's not their value system.
So really,
it's
we're
all on the same level.
Defining value right this.
Yeah,
second.
we're all on the but the
is.
bottom line is there's no such thing as a biblical value system and then a worldly value system. Is that there is a thing that people do call values, like I said, but they're not very good they're not successful at those things. Mm-hmm. I want to be rich. I want to have lots of money. Usually people like that are not very good at that. They're just not very good at it at all. It's people who are good at something else are usually the ones who are able to make a lot of money. And having a lot of money may be a way of gauging certain things, but yet in the Bible, it's the same. God's blessing is which is just a different way of terming it. God's blessing is the financial increase. You talk about Abraham, was a very wealthy man, and it points this out. It points
Yeah.
out, the spoils of war. It points out the wealth of David. Solomon, the Queen of Sheba, comes to see all that Solomon is, his wisdom, his wealth, his fame, the temple, as all these successful things, but it's not because he said, I want to be successful, and so therefore I'm going to do these things because these things are going to make people want to look at me and say, wow, he's really successful.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I say it's important to understand is that if you want to be a successful secular man or you want to be a successful Christian man, the road's the same. There's no difference of the road. The road is the same, and you will find more and more that that's what we're seeing, especially in the last several. We had this period where you just had these worthless people that had no real morals, that were rich, and giving rich people a bad name, you could say. But then all of a sudden, just in the last, you look at these people, and I'm not talking about the fact that these are people who are role models. I'm not talking about the issue of role models, but what I'm saying is you can see that they are cut from a different piece of cloth. Is you have people who were nobodies who become very, very wealthy because they've had attributes that are very successful attributes. And so you're talking about being industrious, inspired, these kinds of things. And I could mention, if you go through, I was just looking at a thing today, the Forbes, top 10 billionaires or something like that. And I'm not going to mention the individuals because there's no point in mentioning the individuals because the point will be lost. Because you can see they have flaws, you can see they're human, and it's real easy to broad brush that and just know these people they're horrible, awful, nasty people because they have flaws. But you miss how they became wealthy. They became wealthy because they were industrious. They didn't become wealthy because they were being shady,
Yeah.
and they were scamming and conning and made their way to the top, out of burning everybody below them. It's not that kind of a thing. And so you look at this more recent trend of billionaires. These are industrious people, not just people who've inherited wealth or have gained it by taking advantage of other people. And so that's why I think it's important to understand that if we're going to talk about being a good man or successful man, you have to understand that there's only one reference for what that means. There's not two. There's not the secular reference and then there's the spiritual reference. No, they're the same person. The issue is that what happens is that when you are, like we were talking about earlier and before we started the podcast, you have these people that are rising to fame and they're realizing, that I need to be a principled individual. That road often leads them to Christianity because they realize, what, I'm getting way out here, and people are looking at me, and I better make sure that there's something to me for people to look at, and they become Christians. Or what they end up doing is they just end up monetizing their success, and they just sell out. And their popularity decays along with that. Their name is no longer asked or mentioned, in conversations, and there are podcasters, that had become really famous, or musicians that have become really famous, or people who've done something industrious that being really famous, and then they've been on that road and have that discovered fame, and then it was, okay, what am I going to do with my life now? Now that I'm famous, what am I going to do with my life? And the decisions they make during that time, they have to be godly decisions. Because if you make ungodly decisions, then you lose the fame.
Mm-hmm.
So it's something that really needs to be understood, is that people don't stay on the top just because they're scamming and gouging everyone. A lot of the poor-minded people want to blame wealthy people for all the problems in the world, and that's the wealthy people. They're stomping on all the, other people, keeping them from getting ahead. But you miss the point that these people, they weren't born wealthy and lived wealthy. So many of these people became wealthy along the way. And so if they did, then obviously those rich people that you're talking about didn't affect them
Right.
because they made it. So it's a issues of maturity that you have to deal with. And Christianity just simply, or the Bible more specifically, just makes it more easy to learn how to be like that, because it's so very defined in the Bible. These are things that people have to discover usually on their own, but like Tony Robbins made this statement, and just an incredible guy, high functioning individual, and did one of his motivational seminars, and he's building it all the way up to this last point, and he's not talking as a Christian, and he says, if you want to be successful in life, set your goal to help other people. And I thought, gee, wow, isn't that
Yeah.
amazing?
Yeah.
That first century carpenter really knew what he was talking about,
Yeah,
didn't
yeah.
he?
Yeah.
And so here this is the expression of a secular successful individual who is now working to make other people. He's now accomplished success and now has made a business out of helping other people to be successful. And what does he say? What does the man's man have to say about being a man? Help other people.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know.
So, okay, so before I want to drive that question a little further, but I want to ask a question to the listener, and this is for both men and women. I mentioned this on Sunday night. I wasn't going to exclude women from this, but I'm curious. I'm actually curious to see if there's any large differences between the answers here. So, men, step it up. You guys gotta answer this question. The question is very simply, what is a good man? So, from your perspective and your opinion, what defines a good man?
That should be a very interesting question. I like, you have to come up with a lot of questions. Think about those kinds of, because that's a good idea, because it's not based on being able to give the right Bible answer.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's one of the things that I've kind of noticed is a lot of the questions are like, giving the good Bible answer.
Yeah.
And that's like, that's children's Sunday school stuff.
I'm glad you said that, because when I was thinking about asking this question, I actually meant to specifically say, "Don't give me a Bible answer," and I'm very glad you mentioned that already. But
yeah,
so,
because that is the thing is that those are valuable questions. What do you think about a thing is
Yeah.
more important, not what is the right thing to think.
Yeah.
What do you think? Because that's the whole point of what when I first started dealing with doing the podcast. I wanted it to be a way of being able to speak about things that would be dealt with in sermons, but to be able to give it a credibility of a more casual environment. What I mean by credibility is that people don't respect sermons anymore. And I believe that there's some reason behind that, because I don't believe that the care that used to be given for sermons, the study and the life lessons that were already learned by the preacher are as common today. But there are those out there, but usually don't find them behind a pulpit. Usually find them doing either seminars of some sort or, like I said, a podcast situation. And so, because this is really the issue, is what do you think? What's wrong with what you think, and how can you change your thinking? Really is what I want our podcast to be about, is so that you can grow. That's really the issue, is that this can be an opportunity to be able to grow spiritually, for everybody to grow spiritually, not just Christians, but for everybody to grow spiritually. Because if you're growing spiritually, and I've noticed this amongst people who are, the talking heads of our world, that as they're sort of discovering truth along the way and having, being in this place of accountability to the world around them for the things that they say, it's amazing how many of those people begin to veer down the path of spiritual reality. It's interesting, Jordan Peterson's next book, about God.
Yeah.
Not as a Christian. He's not telling the book. Not writing the book as, from a Christian perspective. It's from the perspective of somebody who's in public scrutiny, and is beginning to realize that there's a lot of responsibility behind being Jordan Peterson. And it's like, oh my goodness, I need to do something with my life, that is credible, because the last thing you want to do is just to be on, a household name. And then, oh yeah, remember that guy, Jordan Peterson? Yeah, he was the guy, he left his wife, yeah. I used to have some good things to say, yeah. Oh, and his family was really great. And, but, man, how sad when things like that happen. You don't want to become that kind of person that have people say it's sad when things happen like what happened to you. And but we all have to deal with this, whether we're famous or not famous, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
All of us have to deal with this issue. There are many people wasting their lives today because they don't understand spiritual truth, and they're just wasting many, many years of their lives in church as well as out of church.
Okay, so answers are starting to come in, and I wanted to drive that question a little further that I asked a minute ago, because thinking specifically about we were actually, the conversation we had the other day was centering on Esau. Do you remember the conversation we had talking about Esau and him not valuing his birthright and not seeing any value in what is what good
I do
is
remember that, because you had mentioned the okay, this is fun. You had mentioned the what was the importance of the birthright.
Yeah.
And
So
I think we talked about that on the podcast as well.
I don't think so. Possibly, but
No, we just mentioned it.
maybe. But the thing that stuck out to me about that conversation was the fact that a man could look at something that God gave him. This is a God-given, and obviously, if God gave it to you, it's valuable. It's not like God just kind of like, toss, you just have your, whatever. It's like he didn't. There was obviously a purpose behind this, and later on, we see Esau deeply regretted his decision.
Yeah,
and so what? I don't know how to ask this question, and I thought a lot about it. So this isn't me just on the fly here, but The plain question is, why didn't Esau value it? How come he didn't see the value in it that Jacob saw? Because Jacob looked at it and said, I want that.
Yeah.
I want what you have. You have something that you were born with, but I want it. And I'm willing to do whatever it takes to get it. And so he in a sense, he hustles him out of his birthright, and Esau gave it freely.
Yeah.
Well, no problem.
Yeah.
Give me a bowl of soup and I'll gladly give you my birthright. And he did. And what's interesting is that God totally honored that. He ended up getting it.
Yeah.
It wasn't like God said, no, that's not how this works, son.
Yeah.
No. Jacob honored it. Jacob wanted it.
Yeah.
Did what he valued it, and Esau didn't. And so God gave it to Jacob.
Yeah.
And that birthright meant everything.
Yeah.
And so why didn't Esau value his birthright?
Because he was childish.
Okay, so then the next question is, how does somebody look at their birthright with the right level of value?
Well, that's what I'm saying. When you're childish, you can't look at things that are valuable and see value. That's the problem. You can't see the value, and that's what's important, is the issue of value, and not being able to see the issue of value. And so it's interesting, as a pastor, I have there's so many advantages to when you're working with people, lots of different people. You begin to observe things about people that you probably wouldn't see just, being part of, working a job or whatever that doesn't really involve that many people. Is that it is really interesting to watch how the things that people value, is very interesting. It's like, I could use, maybe I will, I'm trying to think of ways of doing it without being too focused on a particular individual, but, people that are very into routine, your wife had mentioned it, I'm into my lists.
Yeah.
And so I'm not talking about her, but There are people who they're so much into routine, but yet really aren't too terribly worried about accomplishing anything in that routine. They do this for this period of time, and then they go here and they do this for this period of time, and then they do this for this period of time, and they do this for this period of time. And so their whole day is really kind of lined out by, I do this for an hour, I do this for a couple of hours, I do this for an hour. And they've made a single synapse connection, a good one, but it's only a single synapse connection, that discipline is important, but that one synapse is not going to get them anywhere in life, because they don't take the time to realize that what they are doing in those disciplines is as equally important as the discipline itself. So you may be doing something during that period of time, but is that something productive? That's the question. For example, in a Christian environment, for example, there are people that will regularly pray, but yet they just copy and paste their prayer list every service. They're faithful to put in names of people, but they'll just copy and paste their prayer list. I've mentioned this before, into the thing, and this will be going on for years. And so prayer is supposed to do things. So there should be names or people or things coming off the prayer list.
Yeah.
But they're faithful all the time, every day, every opportunity to get other people to pray for it, to pray for certain things. But yet there's no interest in an outcome from that prayer. And that's what I mean about one synapse, is that they've made the connection that somehow prayer is important. And so they're praying a lot, they're getting other people to pray. But yet it's not doing anything. Nothing's changing. The prayer request remains the same. There's no difference in the prayer request. I need this. 10 years later, I need this, and it's still the same this. Nothing's changed. And so, like I said, you've got one synapse, but you've got somewhere along the line the success synapse has never connected. Well, is this even worth doing? Is it even worth, or am I just wasting all this time and effort on something that's just, I could do without? What else could you be doing with that time? Maybe you could be doing something with that time that's more productive than praying. If that's all that prayer is just making mention of things, which I don't believe it is the case, but I like to use that as an example because it's something that's very typical. Most people who, if they believe in God at all, they say, I pray, and I pray for this or I pray for that. And they mention, things, oh yeah, well, I've been praying for this or I've been praying for that. And it's like, yeah, but you've been praying for that for part of your lifetime. And nothing's been happening. Either prayer doesn't work or you're praying for the wrong thing.
Yeah.
You've missed something somewhere. And so that's, that's the scenario in the church. But people who, they're faithful to be at work. I'm always 5 minutes early. I'm never less than 5 minutes, early to work. I'm always 5 minutes early to work. Well, great. You're always 5 minutes early to work. Are you of any value to the company? Well, I leave that to other people. I just do my job. I get here and I just do my job. Well, companies don't just hire people to do their job. They hire people to help build the company. Mm. Well, that's for other people. But I'm here. I'm an example. I'm here 5 minutes early, get my cup of coffee. I have my routine. I get ready and I'm at my desk and I am working at the moment I'm supposed to start be working. Okay, but what have you accomplished in the last 10 years that you've been doing this? Well, that's not important. What I've been accomplishing in the last 10 years is that I have been to work every day, and I can say I've never been late once. That's a synapse. It's one synapse, but there's still a lot more to life than just that one thing. And so that's what I'm talking about. That's the idea, is that if you don't value the right things, and so you have somebody like Esau, who's a hunter, he can catch game. His dad really loves his game, and so he goes out to hunt, and to that day he doesn't score anything. And then he comes and it's like, I'm hungry. I need to eat. It's only been one day. It's not been months, and maybe he's put his 100% effort into it. And maybe it's been a long day, and maybe he is really, really hungry, and maybe he is fatigued with hunger, but he's not going to die. But to say, what good is this birthright to me? I need a meal right now. That's more than just simply somebody who's hungry. You're talking about somebody who, the issue is not that he put hunger before. That's not the issue. The issue is not to try to debate whether or not hunger is a viable, motivator of life. The issue is you have a destiny that you have no value for, that even something as simple as having a meal, and that's why the end of that, it says in the Bible, it says, thus Esau despised his birthright. And the Bible later on talks about him as a profane person.
Yeah.
And they both have the same idea. Being profane and despising is the same. It's the same idea. It's taking something valuable and making it contemptible, that it's not valuable. Who cares? It's not important. And that's what literally what Esau was saying is, this is not important to me. Destiny is not important. And the reason why it wasn't important to him, I think, is important to understand, because he just expected he was going to have it anyway. He didn't think he would, because it's the birthright is literally the birthright of the firstborn. Mm. Jacob's never going to become the firstborn son, no matter how hard he works. Yeah. That's a done deal. So Esau doesn't need to worry about it. I'm going to have the blessing of the firstborn. And that's why he was so shocked when he come to find out that he didn't have it. It was like, how can this be? How can I not have my birthright? This is impossible. This is not something that can happen. But that was the issue, is just despising it, and not thinking anything about it. And this is a universal issue, is that I'm surprised. I really am. I've talked to people. I remember the first time that this happened, I was talking to somebody who was 80 years old, talking about Jesus and eternal life and heaven and hell and all these factors. And they were agreeing with me. They were agreeing that this is important stuff. And they made the statement, I'm not ready. And I thought, this says a lot about when people say I'm not ready. Mm-hmm. It's not that they need to do a few things and then they're going to be ready. They're not ready because it's not important.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. It's that, I'm not ready. It's another way of saying, I know what you're saying and I believe it's all true and stuff, but it's not that important to me. I'm not going to do something about it because it's not that important. It's not a question of being ready from the standpoint of, I've got things I have to deal with and then I can do this. That's just the statement that's made. But the reality is this is not important to me. Yeah. Yes, it's all true and I believe it all, but it's just not that high of a priority for me.
So there's, I'm going to try and mix some of these together just to save time. We're at 7:37. I think, is it okay if we go a little over with this into the off-topic
Well, let's see how
segment?
we go.
Yeah, let's see. So I'll try and I'm going to put a couple of these together because they talk about the same thing, but I'll mention them separately and you can just answer, at the end of those. A good man is one of strong morals and convictions and enough integrity to keep them. And then the next one has integrity, is faithful to all his responsibilities.
Yeah. And the truth is that doesn't divide out, like what I was saying in the beginning. That doesn't divide out in there's the secular idea and then there's the spiritual idea. The secular idea is the same. The secular idea, people don't say a good man is a man who has a lot of money. That's not what they say.
Yeah.
That's not a saying. It's one thing to want to be rich. It's another thing to be good. And they're not the same thing. And there are bad rich people and there are good rich people. They're not. There's no such thing as I'm a rich person, so I'm obviously good. And so that's what I'm talking about when you talk about values. The issues of values is that these are not. These are God, because they're God ordained. God has ordained what is valuable and what isn't valuable. We haven't. We do not decide the value of a thing. Mm-hmm. We may decide from within our control level that something that God says is valuable, we don't think is valuable. but that doesn't make it not valuable. It just makes it not valuable to you, and you'll end up like Esau.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that's what will happen is that something that God says is valuable that we say is not valuable, it's going to come and bite us in the butt one
Yeah.
day.
Yeah. So take me into a couple of these though. There's strong morals. What are strong morals and convictions? You know, what does that look like in a good
Well,
man?
this is the thing that's interesting because at an atheistic level, atheists they're shamed. They have been shamed into having to include morality in their atheism,
Yes.
and they're it's not, you know, for
Yeah.
atheism or evolution. Morals are excess. They're just baggage. They're just excess baggage, because it was immorality that propagated the species, not morality. Morality means you choose a partner. Immorality says we just proliferate, which is how we got here. You know, the atheistic point of view. We didn't get here by monogamy. We got here by polygamy, and not even polygamy. Nothing. Just there's probably a word for it that I don't know what it is. You know,
Promiscuity?
yeah. Well, it's just promiscuity, but I'm sure there's
Yeah.
there's an
That's why
anti word.
yes,
You know,
yeah, yeah.
not married to as many women as I possibly can find, or as many men as I possibly can find, whatever the case is. But it's actually needs to be many women because many men doesn't make a blind bit of difference. But anyway, so the idea though of morality, you know, it really is, when it comes right down to it, the core of morality is self-restraint. You know, that's what it comes down to, is self-restraint. And so that's why I say that, you know, this is a real problem for atheists, because for an atheist to incorporate morality into his theology or his anti-theology, it really does mess with the ability to be able to stay true, you know, because you can't go in both directions at the same time, because in atheism is the pass for immorality. It's the pass for freedom to do whatever you darn well please, because there's no God directing this. This is an accidental event, and events, and everything is accidentally promoting success. So therefore, it's better for you to violate all rules of restraint, because the less restraint you have, the more opportunity you have for good accidents to happen and to fulfill the evolutionary purpose for your existence. But it just doesn't work, you know. And so that's why these ideas of morality are, because we know they're true. We know they're true, because to try to be amoral is chaos. And you can talk about chaos theory all you want, but chaos theory is fantastic as long as it remains a theory. But if it ever becomes a practice in life, it's chaos. Let's just face the facts here. You know, we know what that means. You know, so trying to make chaos look like a good thing is just silly.
Yeah. So what about integrity? Real quickly, we're at 7:42. What is integrity? Really?
Same
what does that
idea.
look like in a good man?
Yeah, same idea. Integrity again is restraint. It's the ability to color within the lines. You know, and that is what integrity is. You're not coloring outside of the lines. You know, I used to joke about people that in church that you know, that they're not coloring outside the lines. They just don't have any drawing to color. And so as far as they're concerned, everything they do is in the lines, because they're the ones who make the picture, and they just keep remaking the picture. That's not integrity.
That's childish, actually.
Yeah, but that's not integrity. You can't have integrity without restraint. And so integrity, the idea of something being integral, you know, just the idea of something having integrity, we don't just use that for talking about people's character. We use that about everything.
Yeah.
You know, structural integrity.
Support. Yeah.
You know, what determines structural integrity? Well, certainly not mixed metals. You know, you don't use mixed metals. You can have alloys that can be structurally integral, but we say it that way, don't we? This is a mixed metal, but it is structurally integral.
Hmm.
Why do we say that? Well, because we know that mixing of things together can have a tendency to go the wrong direction. You want something that's more solid, something that's made of less materials, less of a conglomerate of things
Yeah.
in order to be, unless the goal is to try to take advantage of the individual integrity of many things and combine them together.
Hmm.
And so that whole idea of integrity is very central to what it means to be a man.
Yeah.
Because you can't be a man without that,
Yeah.
and that's very important.
Takes care of, is faithful to all his responsibilities, takes care of what needs to be taken care of. This is another two put together.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the interesting thing, when the Bible talks about, the idea of, Jesus is talking about prayer, the issue of prayer and persistence and getting answers to prayer. And then at the end of that, which is kind of the opposite of what I was talking about of the disciplined person who doesn't achieve anything, is here the persistent person is placed in front of us as the example. And then Jesus finishes that parable by saying, nevertheless, when the Son of Man returns, will he find faith on the earth? And so that idea of persistence is tied into that whole idea. What were the two things that you said again?
So faithful to responsibility, faithful to all his
Responsibility.
responsibilities.
So the
Yeah.
responsibility, the idea of responsibility, being faithful, responsibility, is the issue of persistence.
Yeah.
That there's a persistence there, a stick-to-itiveness. You're sticking to it. You don't just give up. A real attribute that corresponds to integrity is you don't quit. You don't quit. I mean, that's just all there is to it. Quitting is not an option. You might need to modify your approach to a thing. You might need to try something another way, but you never quit. You never just say, I quit. I am not going to fulfill this obligation. You might find another way to fulfill it, a different way. Maybe you don't have the resources that you need to go at the thing the way you determined, but you never, quitting is never an option. You go at it from another point of view. You're never quitting. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be the idea that I'm, right now what's coming to my mind is the idea of people that can be in a difficult situation in life, and getting out of that situation might be the goal, to get out of that situation. But often what I see is when people are in a situation where they're like that, and the goal is to get out of that situation, they begin to despise the situation as if somehow that's going to help them to get out of the situation, and it doesn't, because getting out of a situation requires a practical approach.
Yeah.
Not hating something, not despising something. We don't, you might not do something because you hate it, but you don't quit something because you hate it. And what I mean by that is the idea is that you don't get free from a thing. You don't actually get released from a thing by just quitting. The consequences of it will just keep going. So like you could hate your job and you quit and you go, see, I hated my job and I quit. Yeah, but that's going to carry on into the next job that you have.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're in a job that you hate, then what you do is you work towards getting into another job or dealing with the issues that you hate about your job. But the issue that you're dealing with is you're dealing with the fact that you hate your job, not that your job is the problem. The problem is your hatred towards your job, and dealing with that, you're not quitting. You don't quit. When you hate your job, you don't quit because you hate your job. You deal with the issue of the hate. What is it that you hate? What is it that you don't like about it? Maybe it's an attitude issue. Maybe you need to change your attitude. Maybe that is the problem why you hate your job. Maybe there are individuals that are making it difficulty for you, and you're not big enough to be able to grow beyond that influence in your life. You're going to take the childish approach, and you're going to just quit because you don't have the character to be able to handle,
Yeah.
people that are not people that you can control.
So these
You
are all
know,
things that are developed. They're not just the term that kept coming into my mind is the idea of inbuilt. But clearly, at some point in the scripture we read about Paul, Paul
Mhm.
says, I grew to a point where I realized something needed to change. And so is that
Yeah,
inbuilt, or is
but
that
it's not a
learned, or
but
is it
it's not a
developed, or
but it's not a watershed moment. And that's
okay,
an
fair enough.
important
Yeah.
thing.
So
That's
it's
an
in
important thing
stages.
to
It's yeah,
understand.
yeah,
Is
yeah.
it's not That's not the idea. The idea is you're developing. That's the whole when I became a man, I put away childish things. Well, at what point did Paul become a man?
Yeah.
That's the thing, is that, there's no moment, where you become a man. It's different for different people, and it usually has to do with facing several things all at once and having to start making decisions to leave your childhood behind,
Yeah.
and then you begin to move into this new realm. It's not something that just, you snap your fingers and then all of a sudden you start making these kinds of decisions. No, you start practicing them in your youth. It's one of the things I wish that was could be done easily, is to be able to teach, teenagers that those years are the most critical years of their entire life. What they do during their teenage years is going to have a huge, huge effect on the coming years of their lives. All of them, not just for your teen years are going to help you get you through your 20s and 30s. No, your teen years and what you do in your teen years, they're going to help you in your 80s, 70s and 80s, because there's so much that if you can set it in motion in your youth, that you won't have to work out later on, and you won't lose a bunch of time trying to work things out. I am very, very um, aware that there are people, and I know people like this, that they are literally wasting years of their lives. They're wasting them, unconsciously wasting them, and the reason is because they're so tunnel vision about one or two things, and the reason they are is because they were a failure at life. They failed majorly at some situation in their life, and so they're going to spend the rest of their life trying to rescue their ego, by just having one very big, huge, meaningless success. And they're just gonna rescue their egos, and so when they're on their deathbed, they can say, you know what, I was on time to work every day, and I can die now knowing that I was the greatest, single most on time employee at my company that ever lived. And it's meaningless. It's nothing.
I got inspired for some off-topic questions.
Mm,
To write those down real quick.
mm.
Okay, so and by the way, yes, we will have an off-topic segment pending the end of this, and I'll let that in here in 8 minutes. You guys can start filling those in. I don't want to distract from the current topic though. So um, uh, next one is has a growth mindset.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it doesn't matter what age you are. That really is adulthood. We could even that a lot of these things, they factor into both male and female. They're not
Yes,
exclusively.
yeah, clearly,
Yeah, they're not exclusively
yeah,
male. But that is, when a girl has become a woman, and when a boy has become a man, is when they are. What was the wording of that? Say it again. Growth.
has a growth mindset.
Has a growth mindset. That you're talking about a mind, a way of thinking that says, I need to grow. Not I am sufficient in myself. I need to grow, to still have that understanding, or that you need to grow. Or I should say, putting it that way makes it sound like children automatically have this, and they don't. Children actually believe they know everything, and
No
so
way.
so it's a developmental thing when you can come to the place to when you realize how important having a mindset for growth is in life, that you are not the pinnacle of anything at all, and there's always room. It's you have conversations sometimes with people, and they go childish. I knew that when I was 10 years old. And you think, well, you may have known that by some accidental random event of life. It doesn't mean you know anything about it. It just means you knew it as a
Concept.
thing, as a
Yeah.
concept. But that doesn't mean you didn't know it. You don't know it. You hear conversations people have, and and it's funny because they sound like Google. They sound like a Google search by the way they present their facts. Their facts are random and disconnected, and often lack any kind of cohesion between them because they're just Google facts. One doesn't lead to the other. So I read this over here, and then I read that over there, and I was on this blog post that was made by this housewife that whose great grandfather used to be a professional so and so, and it's that's how a lot of the idea of growth is described, and that's not growth. That's not growth. That's trivial pursuit. That's a game. Growth is when you actually are the embodiment of the things that you're talking about, not just the knowledge container. And that's often what people do is they trade actually being something for becoming a knowledge container, and they don't. The problem with being a knowledge container is you're not able to help other people because you don't know when to say what to who. Because you don't know how. You haven't grown. You haven't developed the ability to be able to do that. So you spout off, great deep facts to people that aren't even interested, or aren't even able to comprehend what you're talking about, or you don't have enough of the rudimentary understanding of those things to be able to teach those things to people. There's no foundation for it. It's just all talk.
Okay, last couple here. A good man is disciplined in all things and has a solid foundation in Christ.
Okay, that's pretty lofty stuff. I would tone that down a little bit.
Did I say all things?
Yes.
I totally meant to say in the little things. I don't
Say it
know
again.
how that came out.
Say it
I'm sorry.
again. Say it again.
I heard my own voice.
Say it again. Yeah.
A good man is disciplined in the little things.
Oh, okay. All right.
I'm sorry. When you said
Now
lofty, that's not lofty. It's practical.
That makes much more sense. It's like,
Sorry.
what?
My bad. A
All
good man
things?
is disciplined in the little things and has a solid foundation in Christ.
Yeah. One of the most important lessons to learn in life, and again, that's where this biblical understanding the Bible, and having read it and have learned from it, comes in, is that Jesus said, "He who is faithful in that which is least is faithful over much." I don't pay attention to anybody who's not faithful in least. And when I say pay attention, I mean to look to them as any kind of help in life, because they're not capable of helping anybody, because they haven't learned one of the fundamental truths about life, is that life is not some big event. Life is millions of little events, and how you handle those little events. And when you don't pay attention to that, I mentioned the other day, I don't know if I mentioned it I don't think I mentioned it on the podcast, but my mind is full of old sayings because my parents used to tell them.
I was
to
at
me.
our house the other day. I remember that. Actually, I think it was Sunday.
And take care of the pennies and the dollars will take care of themselves.
Yeah.
This is just wisdom. It's just plain wisdom. Is that when you look at your bank account and go, nope, not big enough, I need more. You're probably the same kind of person who goes, oh man, I'm so hungry. I think I'm going out to eat today. There's a restaurant I really want to go to, and I just can't understand why my bank account's not growing. I've only eaten out 5 times this week. I just don't understand it. I've only had 5 Starbucks a day for the last 6 months. But yet my bank account, because it's the little things, they don't connect with the reality that it is the little things that make the big things. And that was what I was talking about when I talked about a lot of these billionaires. These billionaires are people that learned the little things, and the little things led to the big things, and now they're still like that. And so these people, it's funny because there are some people, when you read about them, I won't mention the name, but you'll probably be able to catch it because Forbes just announced that she was a billionaire, and you can find it out on
Now
your
you
own.
can Google it.
But I won't.
At a different time.
I won't out her entirely. But there are some people when they become billionaires, it's like they're talented people. They've stuck to their stuff, and they've toughed it out. They've had to fight with corporate organizations and boards and governments and all kinds of things in order to be able to be successful. I'm cool with that, But when you've got somebody that just, sort of, landed into money without doing those things, it's like, there's nothing to really respect. There's nothing to really say. Usually with people like that, I usually say, well, she's obviously surrounded by a lot of good people, because I know that isn't the case personally. That it has to be the advisors
Yeah.
that she is surrounded by. And so, but not that others don't have advisors as well, because they must do, because everybody, to get to that level of success, is going to need advisors. But at the same time, there has to be a willingness to put one brick on top of another. And so that's the little things. And so, yeah, absolutely. And what was the last part about that? About being loyal?
Has a solid foundation in Christ.
A solid foundation.
Actually, I can mix that with the next one as
Yeah.
well, which is a good man is someone who's focused on God.
Yeah. So I wanna break that down, not detailed, but I wanna break it in open. Is really what I want to do. It's not so much break it down. I want to break it open, because that's a phrase that needs a definition associated with it. And I think it's very important is to understand that Jesus was perfect. And so say it again one more time.
So the two, or just the one?
Two.
And has a solid foundation in Christ.
Solid foundation in Christ.
And a good man is someone who's focused on God.
Okay, focus on God, good foundation, focused foundation. So they need a definition associated with them. Mm-hmm. You can't just say you're focused. You may come to every church service and you're still not focused. And that is important to understand. And there are people that don't come to church as often as other people come to church that would be a better example of being focused and having foundation, because of the decisions that they make in life. That somebody can come to every church service and still make unethical decisions. And unethical decisions are not just simply, the big decisions, but little tiny things. Being a hypocrite is a violation of that, and there are a lot of hypocrites. And so if you're not a hypocrite, you're going a long way. Just right there. If you're the genuine thing, and so that's very important. It's not just how much you attend church, how much you tell other people that you love Jesus, those kinds of things. I could go on stories and stories and stories of people that, talk about how much they love Jesus and then violate everything that he stood for. So that's not the measure. And so yes, foundation, focus is the fact that Jesus was perfect. And so we have some big shoes to fill, and we're doing everything that we can to be like Jesus, not just firm foundation, focus, those are words, but those words need to have meaning. And that's why I said I wanted to break it open. And that breaking it open means is you are in a race by yourself to become like Jesus. And it's a timed race. You're always trying to break your own record over and over and over again. And that's what it means to have a good foundation and to be focused on God, is that you are breaking the record on your approach to perfection over and over and over again. And I think that's very important, that is broken open like that, so that because I'm very aware, and I'm not even, you know, I do kind of jab at some of the things atheists say because they're not logical, but there are a lot of things that Christians say they're not logical as well. And so I try to logify, if that's a term, to logify some of the Christian vernacular, you know, put it in a way that how it used to be, because that's how it used to be. You know, years ago, 1718, early 1900s, somebody was, if they were a person of integrity and moral character and all the things that we're talking about right now, they were called a good Christian man.
Yeah.
And the reason for that was because the word Christian back then wasn't a denomination of a religion. It was being Christ like. It was an expression of character.
Yeah.
You know, being a Christian man was an expression of what kind of character somebody had, not what they believed. And so that's very important. You read, there's lots of good authors. You wouldn't even, you know, G.K. Chesterton is quoted over and over and over again, and he is a solid Christian. But there are many people who know and respect G.K. Chesterton that don't even know that he was a Christian. You know, because his manner of speech was not to try to get everybody to know that hey, everybody, I'm a Christian, look at me, and I love Jesus. And no, it was, no, everybody needs to love Jesus, and and so I need to be the best example that I can be, and I need to speak wisdom that's going to have the most impact on other people. And there are lots of men like that, you know, of days gone by, whereas a lot of now you have kind of a fork in the road for some reason, and perhaps maybe it'd be a worthwhile thing for me to research in. But there's been a fork in the road where Christianity seems to have gone down one direction, and good men have seemed to go down another direction. And I don't know why that should be. You know, why Christianity should have this. You know, I have some ideas in my mind about it, but they're off topic.
So it's kind of touching on like reputation and stuff like that. You mean as far as
Well, I
Christians
think
go?
no, I think
Like
a lot of
Christians
it.
have a bad reputation.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
no longer
yeah.
associated with character or good character.
But because Christianity is no longer associated with character,
Yeah.
it's developed a bad reputation.
Yeah.
So, kind of rejigging
Yeah,
your words
yeah,
a little
yeah.
bit. But that's the idea. I think more than anything else is that for some reason Christianity has become divorced from character, and the truth is God didn't do that, because we're still all going to be judged on Judgment Day. There's no such thing as I'm a Christian, I'm not going to be judged on Judgment. No, yes, you are. We all are. Every one of us. Jesus said, every idle word that you've spoken, you're going to give an account for on the day of judgment. And no, the blood of Jesus, you know, is you know, I'm free. You know, all I have to do is every charge that's against me is I just have to say the blood of Jesus, and then the judge says thrown out, thrown out, thrown out, thrown out, and I'm not going to have to pay for anything because it's all the blood of Jesus. Like, well, you can live in that fantasy if you like, but that's not what the blood of Jesus is about. The blood of Jesus is not simply an excuse, you know, for our sinful behavior. You know, the blood of Jesus is to rid us of our sinful behavior, not to excuse it away. So,
Well, off-topic questions in now. It's 8:08. It's actually, I'm thinking about it. It's actually not totally off topic, but doesn't specifically apply to men. So I'm stealing it as off topic. But what is, you know, because you mentioned these things about, this is more of a parenting question really, but it also applies to maturity. So it's a lot broader than just kids. But something I have 5 kids for anybody listening that doesn't know that. I have 5 kids ranging from 10 to like 1.5. He's almost 2. He'll be 2 in August, I guess. So he's still kind of 1.5. But we have a decent range of ages. And you mentioned how it's not a watershed moment that somebody
Yeah.
realizes it's time to become a man. I'm a man now.
Yeah.
And so I see that in my kids. I'm teaching them all at different levels how to grow, how to
Yeah.
mature. And maturity has
Yeah.
a way different meaning for my 2-year-old than it does for my 10-year-old.
Mm.
And one of the questions I was going to ask is like, you mentioned, coloring outside the lines. That's a childish thing to do. My kids still give me pictures. They love giving me pictures that they've colored. They'll rip them out of their coloring books. They'll give them to me. They'll write, "I love you, Daddy," on them. Now what I do is I typically just take a picture of them, and then I won't say what I do with them so I don't get in trouble. But I take a
My
picture of
kids
them.
knew
They
what I did
last
with them.
forever. But the other thing is, you talked about hating things that you're doing, or being, this, I just don't want to do this, and so
Yeah.
you hate it, and
Yeah.
so there's this tendency to quit, or a temptation or desire to quit. I don't want to do this. I'm just going to avoid it. But in both of those concepts, both coloring inside the lines and finishing things, doing things, and working the hard things through so that you can get to the end of them, there is this value at the end of them. There's a beauty in coloring inside the lines, right? There is an enjoyment. As a matter of fact, Ecclesiastes was one of my all-time favorite scriptures back in the day. I learned a long time ago, is this idea that it is actually a gift of God to enjoy the fruit of your labor. That's part of God's. I think one text calls it part of our portion in this life. And so God's given man the enjoyment portion as a gift.
Yeah.
That when you finish, when you accomplish something, even though you didn't want to do it, or even though
Right.
you didn't enjoy it, there's
Yeah.
something at the end inside of you that says, I'm glad I finished.
Yeah.
And there's this almost euphoric relief to it.
Yeah.
And how do you get kids to how do you, what's the best way to explain or to show or to help them see the value or the beauty or the enjoyable end to certain things? And that goes
Yeah.
back to the question about Esau. You
Yeah.
had no idea what you were saying no to.
Right.
How do you get people to see that end?
By helping them to do it. That's the most important thing, is helping them to do it. No. Color inside the lines. Let's do this. We're going to do this. Just be careful. Show them techniques of how to color inside the lines, and you don't just, you can do the little where you do the inside part and then you start kind of going
Yeah.
backwards and forwards and, and that kind of thing. And so you're teaching them techniques to make them able to finish. And then the hope is that they will catch the bug, and that's the main thing. Is it's like these things they're like virus, is that they have to become infected, and the only way you can become infected is by exposure. They have to be exposed to it. They have to be able to see it. And the sad fact is that kids rebel, and so they start calling good bad and bad good, and then that's when they get into all kinds of trouble and stuff like that. And so you have to be careful that you don't do that. Don't turn something good into a bad experience for them. And so it's a balance, though, of being able to learn things, being able to learn and be able to do them. Because at some point they're going to teach the others, they're going to teach the other ones how to do it, and then they'll be able to. That's why I joke, with your kids about things like, how to read. You're 10 years old, you better know how to read.
Yeah.
But do you know how to read? It's like I want them to have that idea in their mind that if you're 10 years old and you can't read, you're really, that's not a good thing, and then I know how to read. Well, now they're going to show me, they're going to learn how to read.
Yeah.
And so, but then that they won't need that forever. They'll only need that until they begin to, read things, and mom and dad go, "That's fantastic. You read that." And they're going by, "Oh, I know what that says." And they're reading things, and they realize, I am a part of this world now. I'm not just this blob of flesh that's just, ambling along, but I'm actually a part of this world now. I actually have some component involvement in the world that I live in. And so then they'll grow from that, because they'll realize, hey, you know what? This being something, it's a really good idea. You know, there are people that sad. I know, and have run into that they're not anything, and they know they're not anything, and they've kind of given up on ever becoming anything. And I think, yeah, but you've missed the point. The point isn't that you're not going to be able to become the thing you wanted to become, but it's far better to become something than it is to become nothing. And that if somehow that can be, that can be activated, that you may not be the greatest, but you can be something. And you may have wasted time, and people get saved. And I find it interesting, there's a kind of a moment I find, that people, when they start hitting their 30s, if they're not serious about serving God, more than likely they're going to struggle a lot the rest of their lives. People don't wake up at 50, 60 years old and just all of a sudden, after years of being lazy, become, responsible and stuff like that. And so it really is important to wherever you are, to realize you don't have time to waste. Whatever you're not doing now, you're going to have a harder time doing later. And so you have to develop that again in them, doing things when they're young. It's like Clarissa can tell, Adriana, you hear me play the keyboard and you want to be able to play like me. Well, I started playing when I was your age, and so you don't become like me if you don't practice at your age now, so that you can become like me later on. And then she can begin to develop scenarios of being able to be in a situation to where somebody's saying to her, wow, I wish I could play the keyboard the way you play the keyboard, because she's said that. And so it becomes a thing that becomes the motivator. The motivator has to be, that there's a possibility of me being able to do this, and and then once they do it, realizing I did something that I didn't think I could do, and then that begins to trigger the desire to want to do more. So I am discipline. I'm not against discipline. And my daughter's, oh, you didn't feel like that when we were younger. It was, well, you only saw one side of the fence when you were younger. You can see both sides of the fence now. You don't know what was going on in my head. Back then, this was my goal in all of this, is the idea of inspiring my kids to want to be something with their lives. And that is you do that by helping them to achieve. When they achieve, then they are inspired to be something, because there's, like, you mentioned the fruit of your labor, being able to take the fruit of your labor. When people go to work and come home to give their money to bills, there's nothing inspiring about that.
Yeah.
But when you can catch a vision that, I can make enough money to get beyond bills.
Yeah.
And you start actually doing that, then you start thinking about, wow, this is a much better way of living than just living hand to mouth. Much better way of living. And then you start looking for ways to expand on that. And like I said, you have these people that they give. They give because they've realized that giving opens the door to receiving, and that receiving becomes a blessing because you're using that you have received to give to other people. And now it's an outflow rather than just an inflow. And you start to realize, wow, this is great. I want to do more of this, because you're inspired by your experience.
Yeah. Very cool. That's the end of my question.
All right,
other
then.
Off-topic questions. Well, that was great. We'll be here again next week. And for those of you that are watching this, maybe not live, you're watching it after the fact, I really do encourage you, if you can, make it to one of our podcasts while it's alive and get the opportunity to ask questions. But again, I encourage this every week. You can feel free to throw your questions into the comment section. If you're watching this after the fact, please don't hesitate to do that. Both Pastor Ford and I see those comments, and Pastor Ford will definitely answer those. So that's it for tonight. We will be here tomorrow again, in person, live. We do live stream, but we encourage you to join us. Our midweek service Wednesday night, it starts at 7 o'clock. We do open an hour early, so you can come and meet meet us, and we would love to meet you, and again, give you an opportunity to ask questions, and really at the end of the day meet Jesus for yourself. And so we encourage you to join our midweek service. You can find more information about us on our website. Check out videos on our YouTube channel, and again, we'll be here next week, and we look forward to seeing you.